So I'd like to talk about purpose from a larger perspective. I can summarize my talk in a sentence. We're biocosmic beings learning to live in a living universe. We're biocosmic beings learning to live in a living universe. Now, there's another narrative going on right now, and it's that, well, we're biological beings struggling for survival in a dead universe. We're biological beings, that's it, that's your body, that's the end of it. We're biological beings struggling for survival in a dead universe. It's mostly dead matter and empty space. It doesn't have much meaning, doesn't have much purpose. And so we are on the cusp of a revolution to another understanding of the human journey in its entirety. Not just a piece of it, but the entire journey. We're stepping back now to look at it freshly. And the journey really has three major stages. The first stage is our awakening. And we woke up with a very vague, weak sense of ourself, this magical sense of connection with nature, and a profound lack of language and concepts to understand who we were, what nature is, and so on. And for the last 50,000 years, we've been pulling back from nature. As hunter-gatherers, as agrarian farmers, as urban industrialists, and so on, we've been differentiating ourselves, pulling back, becoming more and more unique and differentiated and individuated. And we become more and more powered along the way until we finally come to a place of deep initiation. And the initiation is to remember our connection with our roots, with where we came from. And if we can remember that connection, we can then begin to make a turn back towards home. And home then is our conscious connection not only with nature, but then with the mother universe that gave rise to the nature within which we exist. So, who are we then? Who are we? We're returning to a conscious sense of participation in nature, in the universe. Now, we could talk about this, or we could look at it in a more demonstrable way, and that's what I would like to do. Some 40, 42, 43, 44 years ago, I was a researcher at the Stanford Research Institute. And I was doing futures research. I spent a year with Joseph Campbell looking at the deep archetypes of human evolution. Another year working for the President's Science Advisor, looking at unexpected problems that might impact us in the future. At the same time I was doing the futures research, the very first research that the government ever sponsored in parapsychology got underway. And they had 4 subjects that they worked with in the first 3 years. And I was one of those 4, and I asked to be anonymous. I'm relatively anonymous, but not entirely so. So I had 3 years to go into the laboratory in the offices where I work, go over to the engineering labs, and interact with a range of equipment to explore the ecology of consciousness. This wasn't only testing, this was a time of also learning and exploration. So, there are 2 kinds of psychic or psi or intuitive functioning. There's yin, yang, in, out, passive, there's expressive, receptive. You probably have heard about the receptive side, remote viewing and such. It's widely understood. Telepathy, clairvoyance, remote viewing, it's receiving information. Now, there's another set of experiments that were done over those 3 years. I was the only person to have an opportunity to work with them, and those were expressive. And they call it psychokinesis. That's mind manifesting essentially in matter. How do mind and matter begin to interact? And they had a variety of apparatuses. They had, for example, this clock, a rotating pendulum clock. And as you see, it has a glass shell over the top of it. Well, then they put 2 glass shells over the top of it, insulated it entirely, had a laser beam bouncing off of one of the arms of that, and then said, we know how this works. We've been running it for weeks. And it runs out this incredibly smooth baseline. This is highly amplified. This is maybe, 5 minutes or so of just a very quiet, and it will run like that for weeks. Now, they brought me into the laboratory and they said, no, look, we want you to have it do something quite out of the ordinary. Many standard deviations out of the ordinary to demonstrate that we actually have this interactive capacity. And I said, well, how do you do that? He said, we don't know, we just do it. And so I spent the first half year as a good white male saying, I'm here, it's there. The job for me is to mobilize my energy here and to push it over there. Now, what happened was nothing. And what I learned was one of the fundamental laws of physics, and that is for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And for as much as I would push, the universe would push back. What I was getting was not intimacy and connection, I was getting existential separation. So after a half year or so, I'd been meditating for years prior to this with Tibetans and such. So I thought, rather than try to move it, I would meditate with it. And so I spent well over an hour meditating with the clock. It got more and more quiet, got more and more smooth, but finally I needed to leave. I had a meeting, and so the energy that was there, I just coalesced around the clock. And within the next few seconds, yes, a key insight. This is from David Bohm, the physicist David Bohm. I was trying to understand how in the world, after half a year of not being able to interact with it, how could I interact with it? And David Bohm made the statement, well, the universe is an undivided whole and flowing movement. And I thought, okay, I don't need to connect with it. I'm already connected with it. It's an undivided whole. And I'm trying to move it, but it's already in motion. Now, I'm missing something here. It's an undivided whole and flowing movement, and it's already what I'm trying to accomplish. And so what I did was, rather than try to move it, was to become one with it. And that's where we were in the description. So after that hour or so of meditation, I then coalesced the energy around the clock. And you can see what happened. It not only begins to fluctuate dramatically, it starts to essentially tear the strip chart recorder apart. It was vibrating so strongly, it was just tearing the recorder itself apart. Now, there's some lessons here about the nature of the universe. First of all, this is the key one. Domination doesn't work, dancing does. Key one. And if you think about it, if you go over to someone and you just push on them, they're going to push back. If you go over and say, hey, let's dance. And they say, oh, okay, let's dance. Well, you got to be willing to move in order for that movement to happen. So if we're going to live in a living universe, it's part of it is our being willing to dance as well. Now, here's what I would say. All of us are connected. I am not special in any way. What I had was a special opportunity for learning, not a special ability. This is key. And if 500 years ago someone came to you and says, wow, you know how to read? You must be an amazing person to know how to arrange letters and make that into a language. You're an amazing person. Well, we have yet to develop the literacy of consciousness. What I had was an opportunity to develop, over a period of years and a lot of experimentation, a literacy of consciousness. So, third lesson, we live in a living universe. These intuitive connections can be learned. There was just a small illustration of that in the slide. So there is a literacy of consciousness that we're just beginning to acquire. And if we're going to make that turn towards home, it's that literacy that is crucial. Part of that literacy, our being does not stop at the edge of our skin. It extends into the ecology of a living universe. So we're dancing with aliveness all the time. How much time? So we're dancing with aliveness all the time. We're biocosmic beings. That's our very nature. We are not only biological beings, but we are part of the cosmos as well. And that's why this works. So, well, how big are we? We're as big as our consciousness extends. So if I was doing this work and I was 4.5 miles away from the laboratory, it still works. This still works. Miles away, the distance doesn't matter. These are capacities that are translocal. This is in the holographic quantum nature of the universe, being biocosmic beings. So, it's not advancing. How do we advance? All right. There. We advance to the wisdom of Plato. Plato, more than 2,000 years ago, he said the universe is a single living creature that contains all living creatures within it. So here we are, a life form living within a larger living creature. But now think about it. The universe is only about 14 billion years ago, and where did it come from? I'd say the mother universe. We're in a daughter universe, and here we are as life forms in a living universe. It's a part of a mother universe, I suppose. So it's life within life within life. Now, we don't have time to talk about key attributes of the universe, really. But I do want to talk about one. It's this one. Until 5, 10 years ago, people said, look, if I can't touch it, smell it, measure it in some way, taste it, it doesn't exist. It's not real. And only the things that we can touch through our senses, only that is real. Now, a revolution has occurred. And the revolution is to say somewhere between 95 and 96% of reality is not accessible to our senses. It's beyond our senses. And the amount of reality that we can actually grasp with our senses is roughly 5 or 6%. So the theory of everything being developed by physicists is really a theory of only 5 or 6% of what's going on. And we're now beginning to appreciate that 95% of reality is invisible to our senses. But I would suggest it is visible to our intuition. And that's what you were seeing in the laboratory. In the laboratory, it's visible to our intuition, a place 4.5 miles away with a magnetometer or a clock or whatever the measuring apparatus might be. It's visible to us. So we have this enormous untapped capacity for understanding, connection, communion with a living universe. And we're just beginning to develop that. Now, a key insight. We're still looking at the nature of reality, but a key insight is you're a part of this universe. Doesn't it make sense that 95, 96% of yourself is invisible? Because you're a part of the whole, and if you're a part of the whole, you're going to be part of the dark energy that's an expansive force. You're going to be a part of the dark matter that's a contractive force, and then you're going to be present as a biological being. All right. What's the universe doing? This is foundational to purpose. What's the universe doing? What's the purpose of the universe? And if we look not at language, but rather at architecture, there's an architecture that runs throughout the universe, and it's an architecture of, it's called toroidal architecture. It's a torus, a self-organizing system. It looks like a donut. And it turns out that a torus is the simplest geometry of a self-organizing system. Very, very important. The simplest geometry of a self-organizing system is in the form of a donut-like structure, and a tornado, a tree, the cross-section of an apple or an orange, and on and on. If you start looking, you're going to see toruses everywhere, and there's a reason for that. And that's because the central project of the universe is to create self-organizing systems at every scale. From the atomic, and if we had the time, we'd look at it, up to the galactic, we'd see the structures. And throughout the universe, there is this singular structure dominating at every scale, and there's a reason for it. The universe is a garden for growing life. And to grow life, it has to have a capacity for self-referencing, self-organization. And that's exactly what we're seeing in the architecture of life throughout the universe. So the universe has this extraordinary project of growing, self-organizing, self-referencing, self-awakening systems, organisms throughout. Now, I would suggest that this process is well underway. And if we look, and this is one of my favorite transitions, looking at from the global down to the personal, if we look at what's happening at the personal level, we're measurably waking up. Here's a wonderful survey. It's been going on for well over a half century now. But in 1962, people were asked, have you ever had a mystical experience? And that being an experience of profound intimacy, connection with the universe, a sense of peace, a sense of belonging. Yes, I belong here in this larger universe. I'm at home here. In 1962, 22% of the adult population said, yeah, I've had that experience. Now, if we fast forward a half century, it's gone from 22% to 49%, and that was in 2009. So we are surely more than 49% now, which means we're more a nation of mystics than we are probably of materialists. In terms of direct experience. A couple of other here's another survey. 60% of the adult population in 2014 in the US said they regularly experience a sense of spiritual peace and well-being, and half said they have this sense of wonder and awe every week with regard to the universe. On a weekly basis, we are having experiences of wonder and awe and our participation in a living universe, but we're not being told that it's alive. We're being told, well, it's a dead universe and you're struggling for a miracle of survival in this dead system that really doesn't have any meaning or purpose, and it's not really going anywhere. So we're on the verge of an extraordinary transition in our evolutionary journey. To summarize, science is pointing towards aliveness. We haven't really had a chance to look at this, but if you break down science and the attributes of science and how it looks at aliveness, it is pointing towards the universe as a living system. If you look at the world's wisdom traditions, and let me just mention this briefly. Got just a couple of minutes, I can do this. How do the world's wisdom traditions regard the universe? I spent like 20 years looking at this, looking at different translations and so on. And here's the kind of insight that's come up again and again and again. First of all, from the Christian tradition, Meister Eckhart says, God is creating the entire universe, fully and totally in this present now, Everything God created, God creates now all at once. Now that's pretty emphatic, you know. This whole thing is a creation moment by moment by moment. Okay, let's go to Islam. You have a death and a return in every moment. Every moment the world is being renewed, but we, in seeing its continuity of appearance, are unaware of its being renewed. Rumi. Buddhists. My solemn proclamation is that a new universe is created every moment. That's from the Zen tradition. Hindu, the entire universe contributes incessantly to your existence, hence the entire universe is your body. It's the Hindu. Taoist, the Tao is a sustaining life force and the mother of all things. From it, all things rise and fall without cease. Indigenous, there's no such thing as emptiness in the world. Even in the sky, there are no vacant places. Everywhere there is life, visible and invisible. See, there's a common theme across all of the world's wisdom traditions, that the universe is a living, regenerative whole. And very importantly, it isn't a static whole, it is a unified whole in flowing movement. And it's recreating itself freshly at every moment, which means every moment is a fresh start. Every moment is a fresh start. It's a new creation. So, science points towards aliveness, the wisdom traditions do, and our everyday life experience does as well. So, what is our purpose in a living universe? 3 levels, discovering, developing, and serving. So, first of all, we have to discover our biocosmic nature. We're certainly grounded in our biological nature. We're advertised and reaffirmed in that day in and day out. Our cosmic nature, the 95% of ourselves, is largely neglected. But we are learning the tools of discovery through meditation and many other tools, discovery of our other qualities of being. So, discovering, developing. If we had more time, we would talk about who are we behind and underneath our body. And I would suggest 4 qualities. We're a body of light, love, music, and knowing. A body of light, physics says luminosity. This whole thing is a creation of light. The whole universe is a creation of light. If they talk about enlightenment, of course, you're going to be more luminous if you're more in touch with the aliveness of the universe. Love. What is that? That's a sense of intimacy, communion, connection. That sense of compassion comes out of that. Well, if it's a unified whole, love is at the foundation of it all. Music. Every person is an orchestra. Every person you meet is an orchestration of their karma, their history, their purpose, they're an entire body of resonance. And you could find that in physics, and you can certainly find that in the spiritual traditions. And lastly, we're a body of knowing. Light, love, music, and knowing. We have the ability, as I was suggesting earlier, these intuitive capacities, both receptive and expressive for knowing and relating in this living universe. We use these capacities in relationship. You look across the room, there's my loved one. It isn't just biology and chemistry in your body. It is also the intuitive psychic dimension of life coming alive in that loop of connection. So, we're making the turn. We're making the turn towards home. And this is not simply a transition, this is the great transition. In the past, we've had many civilizations collapse and then rebuild, but that's always been a regional happening. Now, for the very first time, the entire Earth is at risk of collapse, truly. And if we're going to move into a more promising future, it's going to take not only the push of ecological necessity at an Earth scale, it's going to take the pull of evolutionary opportunity at a cosmic scale. It's going to take the pull for all of us to see beyond our racial, our ethnic, our different identities and look beyond that to see that we are biocosmic beings. And our bodies are biodegradable vehicles for this learning process, but that's not the point. The point is the deeper learning that lives in the deep ecology of a living universe that lives in eternity. Thank you.